Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinars with Education USA. Happy Thursday. It's almost the end of the week, and I hope you had a great week and you're already probably in the thrill of the upcoming holidays. But we know that we are also in the midst of the admission process to American universities and colleges. And if you are interested in connecting your life with the arts and you're looking for getting a degree in art majors, this webinar will be something very interesting to you. And as we may know that the American universities, they have their own requirements for admission, and we many times discuss this standard package that you need to collect to apply to American universities. But some universities might require from you something different, which is a portfolio, especially if you're applying for art majors. And today we will be speaking about the visual arts, about the portfolio, what you need to prepare if you are looking for receive a degree from American universities in visual arts. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Skye Rust, the Associate Director of International Admissions, Undergraduate Admission at Columbia College, Chicago. And Skye will be sharing the details of the admission to art majors, and she will be giving us some advice and tips and tools on what it looks like and how we need to prepare to apply for art majors in specifically probably at Columbia College Chicago. And as usual, you're welcome to leave your questions at the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we will be having time for your questions. Skye, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katarina. I am so happy to be here. And I will be giving a very general presentation about portfolios. So if you have specific questions about Columbia College Chicago, we can address those in the chat later. But I want to make sure I give you a very large overview about US universities as a whole. Would you be able to start the presentation, please? Thank you. Okay, so as we know, as Katarina mentioned, there are so many different application procedures for every single university in the US. But if you are interested in the arts, it is very probable that you will have to submit a portfolio or a digital audition. And please don't let this stress you out. Please don't let this intimidate you. It is just one extra little step to do to ensure that you not only get into your university of choice, but also potentially get a merit scholarship based on your portfolio. Next slide, please. What is a portfolio? So this is a very basic question, but I know the anxiety builds up when we talk about extra submissions for an application to university. And I really want to make it, to simplify it for you and build your confidence, because a portfolio is, next slide, a collection of your best work. It is what you have done to this moment in time, and it is whatever you feel are the best examples of that work. And again, I know it's like, well, how do I know if my work is good? How do I know if it's good enough? Please remember, especially if you're coming to study in the US, that we recognize that you may not have had experience yet in all of these art forms, and that's okay, because that's why you're coming to university, to learn these skills. What universities are looking for is that you have a notion of the idea, you have a passion for the arts, and that you have started the process. But we don't expect you to have museum level portfolios. We are excited to have you, genuinely, you as who you are and the work you bring to us. So a typical portfolio is 10 to 20 images of your best and current work. You don't want to submit work from when you were 5 years old, from when you were 10 years old, because you progress and you improve with each year. So the most current it can be, chances are that is your best work. And why do US universities want this? Because the US, again, we tend to review applications very holistically. We really want to get to know who you are as a person. US society is very focused on individualism. We want to recognize the individual. We want to see who you are. So this helps us understand where you fit in at our university. Next slide, please. So types of portfolios. Again, every university is going to have different requirements, but here's some common examples of things you might see and what they mean. Personal thematic portfolio. That includes work based on imagination, things you invent, your interests, your ideas, and then the exploration into those ideas. On the reverse side, an observational or breadth portfolio typically is based on things you observe, hence observational, in life. So objects, surroundings, still lifes. Next slide, please. So here's some examples, and we are going to fly through these. I'm going to ask some questions when we look at each slide, and I want you to think about it. And you are welcome to throw answers in the chat with questions that I ask. You don't have to. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a graphic design portfolio submission. And so this is digitally created artwork. And what you'll notice about this is there's no border. We don't see computer tabs. We just see the image. It's nice and clean. It could be a painting, but it is digital artwork. Next slide. This one is one of my favorite examples. And we will get more into this in a little bit later. I'm going to have some tips that you're going to see on the screen. But what I love about this piece is that the artist breaks some rules. Because the previous slide I just showed you, I commented how there's no border and it's just a clean image. Whereas this one, the art piece, the comic book, is not the complete image. What we see in this piece as well are hands with fingernail polish. So our brains are putting two and two together and recognizing that this is probably somebody who identifies as a female holding a comic book. And within this student's statement about their artwork, they wanted it to be known that this work was created by a female, because this is an industry that has been dominated historically by male comic artists. So in every single portfolio image for this portfolio submission, the student had their hands holding up the work. And while that is not generally something we recommend, adding things to the image, it worked in this case because it was consistent and because they mentioned it in their statement, so we knew what they were going after. Next slide, please. This is an example of a piece where someone photographed something on a wall, and it's okay because there's a border. You see the wall border, but it's not distracting. So this works. There isn't a glare, so it's a photo of a photo. And this is something you have to keep in mind when you are submitting digital portfolio submissions. We aren't seeing the original work. We are seeing a photo of the work. So we have to make sure that it is clean and crisp and the colors are true. Next slide, please. This is an example. So if you're doing more sculptural work, if you're doing ceramics, if you're doing installations, it can be hard to know how to photograph a piece because there's a lot going on. So for this particular submission, we can tell that we are not seeing the entire piece. And that's okay, because in subsequent submissions, we saw more elements of the entire piece. So the point is, it's okay if you want to take photos of parts of your overall piece. Just make sure that we also see the whole. Next slide, please. Another image of a sculptural piece. This one, again, is really great. And why is it great? Because it was photographed well. The background is not distracting at all. The white background is a true white. So really our eyes go to the sculptural piece, and that is what you want. Next slide, please. Again, another example of a sculptural submission. Next slide, please. So this one is very similar to the comic with the hands. And so this particular artist, they were submitting a fine arts portfolio, and they did a lot of jewelry. And I know the sensation when you are submitting a portfolio and you want to submit as many things as you can because you want to show the university that you have so much potential. And so I appreciate the way this artist chose to fit that in with all of the different nail polish patterns. While that itself is not the art, it's implying a sense of fun and creativity that really does go together well with the jewelry. And again, for this entire submission, this particular artist did similar assemblages of hands and nail polish showing off their jewelry. So it was a choice that they made. This is a daring image. It's kind of like, whoo, what's going on here? But you see that the artist is interested in making a statement. Next slide, please. Here's an example. This is somebody who did book arts, or zines, as we call them. And so again, it's the way to show multiple pieces in one image. So for this portfolio submission, the student submitted, they have multiple zines. They submitted segments from each zine, but then this photo was just overall, it was at the end to show all of where the different images appear in each zine. Next slide, please. Another example of a photo submission, we don't see any border. The colors are true. Next slide, please. This is one that was mounted on a wall, and just something to keep in mind, and I'll mention this later as well. Our eyes are trained to go immediately to deciphering text. So what that means to you is a tool. So if you have words appearing in your pieces, know that any viewer is first and foremost going to go to where that text is. So just consider that and use that to your benefit. It's something to know and be aware of. So no matter what, our eyes go immediately to the jersey that the person in this photo is wearing. Next slide, please. This one. Okay, so this is the one where I'm going to ask questions if you want to throw some potential answers in the chat. I'm really curious. What do you think is going on in this portfolio submission? What do you think the artist is trying to say? I'm going to give it a couple seconds to see if anybody's willing to participate. There's no wrong answers. I'll let you know why I'm asking this. So what do you see as a viewer when you look at this? And keep in mind that the questions I'm asking you, these are questions you can be asking yourself when looking at your own work. What emotions does this piece bring up for you? Where does your eye first go when you're looking at this image? Anybody brave enough? Okay, so the importance of this piece is that context helps. And how do we get context? By submitting an artist statement. It is so important to make sure that if there is an opportunity for you to submit an artist statement, anything in writing describing your work, use that space, because this particular piece, again, it's a portion of a whole. It's a portion of a much larger piece. This whole installation is an entire room. And that's important because scale matters. And so we want to know that an entire room is covered in this burnt paper and images of fire being projected on a wall. And so for this student, in their statement, they said that while they were in school, their house burnt down. And these are a combination of some of the pieces that they found after the fire, pieces of paper, but also some they created. And so that story is powerful. And we wouldn't necessarily have known that. I mean, yeah, we see fire, burnt paper, okay, but the story makes it so much more interesting. And a piece, your portfolio image, should be able to stand alone. And this image does stand alone, but the context makes it that much more interesting. Next slide, please. Here's another example of an installation or sculpture being photographed. So even though there's a shadow from the skull on the top of the wall, it's okay because it's not distracting, and for the artist, it's important that we see the whole image with the antlers. Next slide, please. All right, so that was some examples, not to make you intimidated, but to show you what we should expect. And so the next slide after this one, please. These are tips. I would suggest taking a screenshot of this so that you can remember later when you are photographing your pieces. Because again, like I mentioned, we are seeing a copy of a copy. So if it's loose paper, mount it on a wall. And lighting is probably the most important thing that can make or break an image. And every single type of light bulb has a different color hue that it projects on things that we don't even realize because our eyes adjust. But interior lighting casts a hue on things. So the easiest way to not have that happen is to take photos outside, because partial sunlight, there's no hue that's cast on paper. So a white will look like true white. So avoid shadows, an overcast spot, not bright sunlight. You don't want the shadows, but outside, and then you will get a good image. In everything I'm saying, when I say photograph your work, you can use a phone. That's totally fine. Don't use flash. You want natural light. You don't want it to look shocking. Keep your camera still. You obviously want to have clean, crisp photos. Use a simple background. I mentioned that a lot when we were looking at the last series of images, because you don't want a border, a frame, a distracting background to take away from your submission. Next slide, please. So what makes it great? We've seen a portfolio, we've seen some tips. Next slide, please. So I think the most difficult part about this process is there are no 100% answers. So much of this is based on your intuition about what is good from what you've created. And then also it's very subjective, because whoever the viewer is, and at our university, it's faculty members, whoever that viewer is, it's their opinions. It's their perspective on what they see. So it's really hard to give good tips, but these I think are general enough that follow these, and this is a great place to start. So it's cohesive. So you might remember I was mentioning a few times how different portfolio pieces fit into the entire submission that the student sent. And that's good, because then we can see that you're focused and that you are able to follow through on exploring a theme. We should be able to sense who you are as an artist. And so, how do the pieces go together? I like to say that if you have a string and you can connect all the pieces, what would be the storyline? A to B to C. Maybe you need to switch it around. So maybe you're like, the third piece, the A, B, C, C would be better off in the second spot in B. Switch them around. The order is important. This is you telling us your story. Okay, product, not potential. So again, you're applying to university. We do not expect you to be master crafts people. We do not expect you to have your own museum show. We know you have potential, and you are going to make the most of that potential when you are at our university. So what we want to see is the product you make at this point. It should show your abilities right now, not what you're hoping to be in a few years, because if you go down that road, then your skills probably won't be as strong if you trust where you are right now and show us the best work right now. All right, it takes risks. So that example where the artist was holding the comic with their painted fingernails, that's an example of something that takes risks, because you're applying to an arts-focused university. It's okay to take some risks. Just make them calculated risks, make them intentional, make them fit in with the piece. So, like I said, that artist broke the rules of having more than just the piece in the image, but it worked. And that's great. It's presented in a professional manner. So pretty much every single university out there now will accept a digital portfolio submission. So whatever your medium is, just make sure that you are following their directions and submitting high quality images with good lighting. And if you are submitting videos, that they're high quality and good sound. Next slide, please. This is another screen that I highly recommend taking a screenshot of. So it is so important that you get feedback, and it is important that you ask other people their opinion of your work. And I know that can be very stressful. It is so hard to take critique about yourself sometimes. But remember that this is for your own good. This is to make you better as an artist and make sure you have the best portfolio submission. So these are some questions that you can ask yourself when you are trying to objectively look at your work. And also you can use these same questions when you're looking at your friend's work. So how can an idea be developed further? When you're looking at your portfolio images, which ones stand out? And maybe, you want to explore that particular image more. So let's say you're working on a series of paintings, and this one painting really speaks to you, and you're like, what is it about that? Is it the theme? Is it the subject matter I had in that painting? Maybe try doing more paintings of that same subject matter, because you're feeling something that worked. And on the reverse side, when you look at your images, what doesn't work? Did you add text where it wasn't necessary? Did you add a color where it wasn't necessary? Is there something distracting in the background of your photo? What aspects do you like the most? And one that I love and that I think is really hard is the piece visually interesting, not just an interesting subject? So I think this is one that we can all think about ourselves. I was looking at a portfolio, and it was a photography student, and they did a lot of still lifes of flowers, and they were really beautiful, really well done, excellent photos. And then another part of their portfolio they were considering were photos that they had taken at Grand Canyon Park in the US, which is a huge, probably the most famous national park in the US, giant canyons. And they were really proud that they took this trip and saw Grand Canyon. I haven't even seen Grand Canyon. But their images were not as visually interesting because they looked like postcards. They weren't bringing anything new to the viewer. So there was a difference between what the photographer was so proud that they had done the trip, but the images to demonstrate that they weren't at that same level of excitement to the viewer because the viewer didn't do that trip with them. So that's, I think, where it can be hard to do an emotional separation between you and the artwork that you make, because of course, I fully understand that anything you create comes out of you. That means you are vulnerable when showing others your work because it's something that came out of you. I totally get that. And that's why it's good to have questions to really think about. And then the basics, like I mentioned, is there a clear theme? Can you take that string and connect the portfolio images and tell some kind of story? What is it high quality, good color balance, a true white in the image? Where does your eye go? If there's text, it's going to go straight to the text. If there's angles that come together, it will go to that. Think about that when you're considering which pieces make the cut for your portfolio. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, ask for feedback. Everybody gets nervous about this process, but this is the absolute most helpful thing that you can do. You can talk to your high school art teacher. You can talk to a guidance counselor. You could even talk to Katarina, and I hope that, Katarina, you feel more comfortable talking about portfolios today too. You can talk to your friends. You can talk to family members. You know who else you can talk to? You can talk to people like me. So admissions officers, this, especially as someone from an arts-focused university, this is one of my favorite parts of my job, is being able to see the work that students create, because this is where I can see more of who you are. So I tell students that before you submit your portfolio, let's have a virtual meeting and go over your portfolio and tell me what you're thinking. And I'm glad to give my input. It's not a problem. And I know that my colleagues are the same way. We love looking at art. People love looking at art. It's okay to ask an opinion before you hit submit. Next slide, please. So again, make sure that you are following an institution's guidelines. Is it the correct size? Is it the correct file type? Are you adding titles? Are you adding a statement if it's required? Is your portfolio organized? Have you intentionally thought about what image goes first, what image goes last, what goes in the middle? You want to start off strong, end strong, and you've crafted that thoughtful statement of intent. Next slide, please. So I just want to throw this in there. I know we're talking mostly about visual art today, but in case anybody is also interested in digital auditions, just some quick tips. Next slide, please. So these, again, they're really basic. If you're interested in performing arts like music, dance, theater, make sure you memorize your pieces, choose contrasting styles, comedy, drama, jazz, contemporary. Choose age-suitable pieces. You do not have the life experience of someone who is 80 years old. Do not pretend that you will act a piece well of someone that is 80 years old. Trust where you are in life. Don't act the age of someone who is beyond 20. If you're recording it on video, make sure the camera's steady, the video quality is high, and we can hear you. Next slide, please. What is a university looking for? Guess what? A lot of the same things. Cohesive, high quality. Theme, passion. This is something exclusive to US universities. We, again, really want to see who you are, and we want to make sure you're passionate about what you want to study. We want you to be happy. Be yourself. We value this. We value confidence. We value perseverance, dedication, and drive. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So that is my presentation this morning. Just to give you a quick sentence of who we are as a school, Columbia College Chicago, right in the center of downtown Chicago, third largest city in the US. And for those that are looking for a university to go to next year, our portfolio deadline is January 19th. And that is how you get our maximum scholarship opportunity. So if you are interested in anything as it relates to the arts, feel free to email me, feel free to check out our website, and I'm happy to guide you. And that is the end of my slideshow.
Thank you, Skye, for the wonderful, passionate presentation. I did learn a lot today myself, and I think I just be more comfortable or confident to advise to our students about their portfolio. And while we just given some time to our audience to put their questions, I just want to tell to our audience it's a wonderful opportunity for you to hear back from the let's say, admission officer to hear some insights on what you already wanted to know about the admission. But let's go with a little bit more probably a technical part of the admission for these art programs. And my question is about the, well, let's just probably start with the portfolio. Does the number of the pieces of art matter? Would it be like more the better, the more the better, or it depends? What would you recommend to our students?
That's a great question. I would definitely say to follow the guidelines. If it says 10 to 15, look at your portfolio. And if you only have 10 really, really strong pieces, leave it at 10. If you're like, I think I have 12 really strong pieces, go with 12. Don't submit more just because you're trying to show us that potential. Make sure all the pieces you submit are very strong. If an essay or artist statement asks for 250 words, don't go more than 250. You can go less than 250. That's okay too, but don't exceed 250.
You anticipated my next question about the size of the art statement. And then again, does every piece need and like, let's say, an art statement to follow? And about the different types, because I know I work with some students who have different types of like art they are doing, like in drawings, for example. Do they need to show you everything, or like probably go in one direction only in one type of art or drawing only? I know many questions in one question. Okay.
No, I got it. That's a great question, and I think it's this next question that a student asked. Thank you, Polina. From my own experience, so I actually did my master's degree at Columbia, and my major was interdisciplinary arts. Which the whole idea of interdisciplinary arts is that you have a concept and you express it in a variety of media. And for when I came to Columbia, I had the most experience in photography and theater. And I chose to submit, with the recommendation of a faculty member here, a portfolio in one medium, and that was photography. It was my strongest work at this point. That being said, follow the guidelines of the university. So, for example, every single one of our majors has different portfolio requirements. And there are the one major where you can submit pictures of drawings, paintings, ceramics, sculpture is fine arts. You can submit multiple types of work. However, for most of the other majors, they require one type. So photography, only photography, does not want to see paintings, it only wants to see photography. And that's okay. Just trust what the guidelines are asking for, because typically it's faculty members in those areas that are looking at your portfolio. That's where their expertise lies. So you want to make sure you're honoring the viewer as well.
Okay, we have a question for filmmakers. Is it reasonable to show pieces of film photography in writing, for example?
It's reasonable, absolutely. And again, speaking for our film portfolio submission, we give you that option. So you have the option of submitting film, short clips of movies up to 5 minutes, no longer than 5 minutes, or photography and writing. So there's both. You just have to choose between film or photography based on what you have at this point. And again, that's okay, because we recognize not everybody has access to filmmaking equipment.
Thank you so much. Going back to, well, I think it can cover every art, probably a type of art. We have trends. We have like today we have some trend to do something, and it's very popular and famous. One, the student chooses to prepare a portfolio, and I see some debates sometimes when ones want to choose something that everybody probably would like because it's a trendy, or something very unique for the student, but it may not be trendy and probably it might not be interesting to university. What do you, as a university, look for, let's say?
So we look for original ideas, both when you're thinking about academics and when you're thinking about artwork. We don't want to see copying in any form. We don't want to see plagiarism of text. We don't want to see plagiarism of ideas. So it is normal to find an artist or trend that you are inspired by. And if you are truly taking your own creation with that inspiration, fine. But universities don't like to see images of famous people. So if you know who Brad Pitt is, we don't want to see a drawing of Brad Pitt. We'd rather see a drawing of somebody you know, because then you are doing a drawing from life, not a drawing of a photo, which was somebody else's image. So we are truly looking for original work, and that's the best thing I can say. Just make sure that what you are submitting is from your own brain.
Yeah, and it's a great, actually a great idea probably to go to what to do and what not to do. What's the like the most common don'ts that you really do not recommend for the students to do in their portfolio? As you told, probably something like plagiarism and just doing something like a copy of the famous people, like pictures of famous people. What else on your list? What you hate? Well, not hate. Let's say what you don't really like seeing
Sure.
in the.
Sure.
Mhm.
Another one that happens a lot is anime characters. So that kind of touches on your trend as
Mhm.
well. Question: Anime is a style and it's great, but you're borrowing a technique and a style that is walking a fine line of original work and taking other people's ideas. So we just generally say stay away from anime. If you're going to do comic art, that's great, but we want to see your own design for creatures and people. And so stay away from drawing anime, stay away from copying other artwork. So don't draw from a photo you find online, draw from your own brain. And make sure if you're doing something like drawing or painting, don't do it on notebook paper. And we use plain paper. Those are the most common things I see that immediately just
Mhm.
are no.
Fine.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. I have a question from the audience. When applying for masters, considering that the applicant has professional experience in filmmaking, is it better to submit a professional work made with the TV, with the team, or a personal project on obviously lower level?
That's a great question as well, and that will depend on the university to which you're applying. Generally, I would say there's availability to submit both. And as long as you give acknowledgement to the whole team involved with making that and be very clear about what role you played in that creation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I hope if we don't have a question from audience for now, so my question is about the other achievements. I know that my question was what actually you take into consideration. What's the most important part of the application package for the admission commission at the university for our team? So I believe it's probably portfolio, but what other achievements are very important? Do you take them into consideration? What the applicants should be aware of when they're applying? Because I see that some students, they are just putting all their attention and forces to the portfolio, and sometimes they probably leave behind something else, or some other parts of the admission package, which is probably very important.
Mm-hmm. You're right, Katerina. And again, we are looking for well-balanced students. So
Mm-hmm.
you are attending university first and foremost. So the number one thing you can submit to any university is your academic record. And that is also what you have spent them many years on. So it's not a test, it's based on the work you have done consistently over multiple years. So that's the number one thing, because that shows us that you can be thoughtful and intentional and work hard, and that you will succeed academically at our universities, that you will be successful. Because first and foremost, we're universities where you're learning, and you want to make sure that you are going to be able to handle that. And then secondly, for us, is the portfolio. But some other things that you might be asked to submit are an essay or a letter of recommendation. A lot of universities are going away from standardized tests, thank
Mm-hmm.
goodness, because they don't tell us anything about uh, a student's passion for the arts or a student's ability to perform academically over the course of many years. So just look at what a university requires, but definitely your academic record and your portfolio, those have to
Mm-hmm.
both be very good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Probably I see we're almost running out of our time, and one of the might be last question I have for me, it's about the practical part of the studies. We know that we, like American universities, has such thing as OPT, CPT as a program, starting part of the study program in the university. What kind of let's say practical training the art students have? Can you give us some examples?
Sure, absolutely. And from my own personal opinion, if you want to study in the arts, I really think the best environment to do that is an urban environment, because you will be surrounded by cultural institutions, which
Mm-hmm.
go directly into what I'm going to say about optional practical training and internships and job experience, that there are options available for arts students. So if we have, for example, we have fashion design as a program. So obviously fashion design is working on sewing, drawing, creating. Well, you want to be able to have some place to do that outside of campus. And so in a city, so Chicago is an example, you can then do internships at department stores. You can do internships with designers. You can do internships with haute couture. We've had students that do internships with Prada. So every single major, you should take advantage of the opportunity to do optional practical training. Filmmaking students, they get to work on real film, real television that happens in Chicago. Again, using my university as
Mm-hmm.
context.
Mm-hmm.
Graphic design students, they can do internships for magazines, for journals online. We had one student in, her major was journalism, but she also really loved astronomy. And so while she was a student, she did an internship with NASA, our space program in the US. And so now she works for NASA as a science journalist. So the the innovation with all industries happens when you combine things, when you combine journalism and science, or when you combine film and game design. So every major, you will work with a career center. Every university has a career center, and they will help place you in internships for whatever your major is. And you should anticipate doing that. You should plan on doing that. That is how you will get the most out of your experience.
Thank you, Skye, very much for the again for the information provided, and we will be, let's say, in touch. And if anybody who's listening us, watching us now, will have some questions in the future, probably you just will come up with a question after the webinar. Please feel free to contact Education USA, and we will get you in contact with Skye. And thank you so much. I think this is all for today. Thank you again for the wonderful presentation. Thank you for taking your time, and hopefully we'll have more Ukrainian students at your university in the future.
And I hope to see you soon.
All right. And thank you, everybody. And I just have a great night and have a great day to you, Skye.
Likewise. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, goodbye.
Goodbye.